So, and I think the enrollment is part of the, certainly our budget, the tuition revenue that we derive from that, the HERF funding, the stimulus funding that has helped higher ed will certainly play a role, as you'll see today. This latest round has been really helpful for us as a campus and for our students. You'll see that our budget is built with a 2% tuition increase as part of that. That needs approval through THEC, that they have to endorse a 2% increase, and I don't believe they've taken an official action yet as a board, the Tennessee Higher Education Commission. The UT Board of Trustees will also have to approve that, and that won't happen until the last of June, late in June. So some of what we're talking about is based on assumptions of what will happen, and that 2% increase is certainly one of those. The governor built a 4% salary pool into his budget, and I think every campus in the UT is looking at about a 2.75% merit and market pool for salary increases, and we'll get a little more detail on that. You know, we've come through the pandemic in really much better shape than some of us feared we might in the beginning. I think our caution paid off, and certainly everyone's effort did. And this isn't any one person, but I look at our health team, and we learned about contact tracing. We learned about things we never thought we'd be dealing with. We're running testing facility and vaccination facility now. And there's so many things that we've adapted to do in a very quick order. And I hope everyone is as proud of the accomplishments of this team. And I think everyone owns these accomplishments. So thank you. And you know, now we've got few more people who have joined, and I'm going to turn it over to Tyler Forrest, our Vice Chancellor for Finance and Operations, to run through our budget.
Thank you, Chancellor, and good afternoon to each of you all. As I was reflecting back over the last year, I vividly recall that at this very town hall 1 year ago, almost to the day, we had over 440 individuals in attendance. And I think that really speaks to how little we knew at the time about the year we were about to have, but it also speaks very much so to how we've really adapted quite well throughout this year. And I would dare say probably done way better financially than we thought we would had last April. And just like the Chancellor said, I firmly believe that's the result of each of your good work. It's certainly no one individual by any means. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. Given that I won't be able to see the chat when I do so, there are others on the call that are very capable of answering any questions you might have in the chat. So I know Chris and Allison and others are certainly ready to do so if any come up. So hold on just a second, I apologize, I shared the wrong screen. So here we are again doing our fiscal year 2022 proposed operating budget, sharing it with the campus as part of our budget planning process like we want to do every year. One of the questions that we've been asked routinely throughout this fiscal year is, how are we faring financially? How is our financial health currently? And what you'll see in front of you is a snapshot as of the end of last week that showed our revenue over expenditure projection is sitting at about $24.4 million right now. Now, do know that there are right at about 3 months worth of payroll yet to be paid out. There's $34 million worth of encumbrances sitting on our books, some of which will be paid out. I can tell you with reasonable confidence that we won't have $24 million at the end of this fiscal year, but it does speak to the fact that our financial health is strong as of right now, and we are in a good position as of today. To that note as well, on the reserves, we're sitting campus-wide at about $33 million unobligated reserves. Those reserves are in various different buckets, though, many of which are designated funds, such as the mandatory fees and the auxiliaries. Much of that is designated toward future capital planning. Under unobligated campus reserves, we have about $6.5 million, and that number is good, but I will say we would like it to be a little bit stronger in advance of the SACS reaccreditation in a couple of years in order to ensure that our CFI scores, which is how SACS often measures us, are as strong as they possibly can be. We also have about $9.1 million sitting in our emergency fund balances, which are well within the Tennessee Higher Education Commission ranges. So in looking ahead at fiscal year 22 budget planning overview, what are some financial variables that are out there that we're continuing to assess? So the Chancellor mentioned one, which is certainly a big one, and that's tuition and fee recommendations. As you all know, the Tennessee Higher Education Commission now has binding authority to set tuition ranges. We anticipate those to be between 0 and 2, or perhaps 0 and 2.5 this year. And we are proposing a 2% increase, in particular because we did not have an increase last year, and we do have some just general fixed cost increases, which I'll explain more later. State appropriations continue to remain something we watch, even though we have fared very well with new appropriations. It is something, particularly with the formula funding game that the state has, that we could lose funding in 1 year, but we certainly hope we don't. Enrollment, as of this fall, it's looking in a positive direction, but were it to turn down, that's something we would have to respond to, which is something that's occurring throughout the nation in higher education. Stimulus funding. This has been one of the biggest blessings and biggest challenges over this last year, primarily because the federal government has made it difficult to spend in some categories, but we have worked feverishly with a number of folks on campus to try to get those funds deployed, which ties very much so into the pandemic response. Much of this year has been spent expending lots of resources on responding to the pandemic, and I think we have done that fairly well in order to keep the campus open. Moving forward, housing occupancy will continue to be something we watch closely as we look to transition out one housing complex that is past the end of its life and hopefully build a new one, which will require a great deal of debt capacity. That is something we'll continue to watch and monitor, as well as tying in quite well with long-term debt planning, which not just ties to that housing unit, but also University Center renovation, McKenzie Arena McKenzie Arena addition, which will have debt as well, and some other things on campus too. Athletics is always an area we pay attention to, and I will commend all my athletic colleagues here on the call today, because I think they have done an exceptional job from not just a financial standpoint, but across the board in really trying to manage their finances in an exceptionally difficult year for athletics, where their revenue streams were depleted well beyond what they would have ever imagined. And something that many of you all are aware of, but I will share with you, if you're not, the campus is entering into a process of bringing on a new ERP system to replace IRIS. Many of you all saw the email that went out yesterday about a contest to name the new system. So if you have any great ideas to name the replacement of IRIS, only appropriate names are requested. I know some of you might like to say things not appropriate about IRIS, but if you have any good ideas, you could be entered into a drawing to win a $250 gift card. But what does our pandemic financial response look like, or what has it looked like? We've issued a host of student refunds, block grants, emergency fund investment awards, and overall, I would say we've maintained a very positive financial position throughout the year. Future actions will be continuously assessing our financial position, slowly loosening a selective hiring freeze that we've had in place for over a year. If enrollment holds, obviously we'll loosen that quicker than not, and then successfully distributing all HERF funding, which, as I mentioned a minute ago, has been somewhat of a challenge. We've received 3 rounds of HERF funding. The first, called the CARES Act, which most people tend to be more familiar with than the other 2. This was the smaller allocation of the 3, though, and I can report all of these funds have been either fully expended or obligated to be spent by June 30th. And you'll see there we were able to impact almost 4,900 students with these funds, offset refunds issued by auxiliary units, and purchased a host of technology and other PPE supplies across the campus. HERF 2, the acronym associated with these funds are CRRSAA funds, CRRSAA. The student portion of these have also been fully distributed, and the institutional portion, which is right at about $9.3 million, is only in the planning stages. And the reason I emphasize planning stages is we have been waiting on further guidance from the Department of Education. However, what we do know at this point is the vast majority of those will likely go to replace any lost revenue that occurred throughout the year. And we do hope to distribute the vast majority of those funds by the end of the current fiscal year, so we can capture them prior to this fiscal year close. So stay tuned for that. We'll continue to push out information, but I will say we do have past the end of the fiscal year to spend those as well. And then HERF 3, known as the ARP funds, the American Rescue Plan funds. We've received a preliminary notice through estimates that several national organizations have done, but we haven't received the final documents yet. But we do anticipate this award to be a little over $26 million, which is why you don't see any details tied to it. But I would anticipate the student portion going out somewhat in the early fall semester, and then we'll spend the institutional funds accordingly as they become available. What do our budget process goals look like? They're very similar to how they have been or what they have been in prior years, certainly aligning everything to strategic goals and trying to ultimately have the most transparent possible process that we could. And we are always extra conscious of being the best financial stewards that we possibly can, and engaging the broadest group on campus that we can as well. I certainly won't go through these, but you'll see there the strategic plan goals 1 through 4 that are in place right now. They will be replaced, but as of right now, we will tie all of our budget allocations to these 4 goals, which is something that SACS COC will want to see as well. Here's our timeline. Many of you all have seen this before. Today, April 27th, we're almost to the end of the timeline by hosting the town hall. On May the 6th, the campus advisory board will vote on recommending the proposed budget, and then we anticipate the UT Board of Trustees to adopt it on June 25th. For the FY22 tuition and fee recommendation, we always like to start out with a look at our current market position. Where are we today? We're right where we have been for a good while, which is in the middle of the pack. We were at the lower middle quartile, but now I would say we are spot in the middle with a undergraduate tuition and fees of $9,656. These are all in-state fees reported at 15 hours, which is how most, if not all, of the campuses report these fees. So from a market position, we're in a good spot, which is another reason we feel like we can take on the 2% tuition and fee increase. Here you'll see a couple charts indicating what the cost of that increase would be to certain types of students. In-state undergraduate, which is our largest population, would be $192 increase right at 2%. Bordering states and out of state also would be 192. The reason those percentages are different is because the out of state portion is not changing. Same for graduate students. The in-state increase would be right at 204. Same for out of state and international as well. Here you'll see the proposed fee changes and the revenue associated with them. Everything ranging from undergraduate maintenance, which is in-state tuition, totaling $1.3 million. I'll point out the mandatory fees bringing in an additional $374,000 and differential fees bringing in an estimated $112,000. All of these increases are tied out to various expenses, which we'll outline in just a second. The one fee that will go up is the debt service fee. That will absorb the entire 2% capacity that we have to increase mandatory fees. The reason being is we desperately need debt service funds in order to make the University Center renovation occur in the next few years. This will more than likely be phase one of phase two of an increase, of a two-phase increase, I should say, in order to make that debt service coverage available. So what will the proposed budget recommendation look like for fiscal year 22? Here you'll see we're adding $13.1 million in new revenue to the budget, with $3.8 million coming from tuition, both from the increase as well as the third phase of students rolling in from SOAR and 4 funds. The formula, appropriations, and salary pools would all be another $4.4 million. The differential fees and other mandatory $566,000. A couple others to point out: institutional reserves. Last year we deployed $5 million of institutional reserves, by far the highest number we had in a number of years. We're much more in line with a more manageable reserve deployment of about $1.5 million. And then the grants program associated with the institutional program as well as the foundation program is $1.9 million. And then you'll see the auxiliary revenue as well. So like I said, a total of $13.1 million. So here's how the budget looks from a pie chart perspective, from a classification perspective. 58% coming from tuition and fees and 30% from state appropriations. If you take out auxiliaries from this, the state appropriations portion will become 33%. And I will say the state of Tennessee undoubtedly would be the envy of most. I don't know if any other state could claim an appropriations as high as 33%. So this is something that we're very happy and pleased to have. I'll note one thing at the bottom of each of these slides, that the amounts could change slightly. Now, due to the timing of how UT's proposed budget process is, this document for the University of Tennessee does not have to be finalized until May the 6th. So there's always a few last minute entries that the system requires that we have not captured here. So if you see this pie chart next fall and we're presenting it and it's $100,000 off from what we shared with you all, you'll know why at that time. On the expense side, appropriately so, right at about 50% of all expenditures go to the academic enterprise, and then the other slices of that pie are all less, obviously, than instruction and academic support and research and public service. Another piece of this pie that we'll talk a little bit more about in a minute is scholarships and fee waivers, which for fiscal year 22 is proposed to be $14.7 million. And these are the institutional fee waivers and scholarships, not the endowed funds. On the expense side, by natural classification, we are spending an overwhelming majority of our funds on salaries and benefits, a little over 60%. At one point, that was trailing about 70%, so it has gone down, not because we're paying less, but because we've added more funds to operating through the years, because as we've grown as an institution, it is requiring more to operate the enterprise. Restricted revenue sitting right at about $65 million. Vast majority of that grants and contracts, and then gifts and endowment, $13.6 million. If you're wondering what the $828,000 in state appropriations is, that is an allocation for the Center of Excellence, which is associated with the SIM Center. You'll see on the expense side of the restricted budget, we are expending out right at about $50 million of those funds in scholarships and fee waivers. The vast majority of that is the Hope Scholarship. The rest of those smaller pieces of the pie are associated typically with various grants that we have on campus. Here you'll see a bar chart of how how the new revenue comes in. Vast majority of it there from appropriations, which is something, like I said a minute ago, that we're very thankful for. And then on the expense side, don't be concerned that we're swelling the institutional budget, because I'll tell you we're not, but that's the only place we have to plug the salary pool until it's allocated to the divisions. So you'll see that institutional mark after July 1 go substantially down, and each of the bars for the divisions go up as those salary pool dollars are allocated. The other one I'll point out is the substantial proposed investment in scholarships, which it almost rivals the institutional bar on this chart. So here you'll see what the proposed allocations look like per division. I won't go through this slide because we have some more details, but you will bring your attention to the $13.1 million number there. As always, we're proposing a balanced budget, so what comes in comes out. So it is balanced as always. One thing I should have mentioned though, because there won't be individual slides for the divisions. The Division of Communications and Marketing, Finance and Administration, and Information Technology have either not requested funds or are reallocating internally in order to have other resources to allocate throughout the division. So I appreciate the good work of all of those colleagues that are trying to use their resources as best as they can in these difficult times. Chancellor's Office, the only allocation there is just a $10,000 from the grants program, which has been a long-standing allocation for his discretion. And there's also a net zero impact from the Vice Chancellor for Equity and Engagement position. Initially, this position will be funded from Access and Diversity funds, and then in the out year, the plan is to roll that position to regular E&G dollars. For Academic Affairs, $2.7 million in new funds for lectures, in roadblock courses, additional advisors, SACS reaffirmation. It costs money to get reaccredited. There's a decent sized budget there in order to accomplish that. Prior commitments related to new tenure track faculty, UCF professorships, and Tennessee Tomorrow Fund allocations as well. Under athletics, most important thing I'll point out here is the addition of a new position related to a mental health counselor. This is something that the Chancellor, Dr. Mark Wharton, and others felt was very important to add permanently in athletics, and had overwhelming support to do so. So that position is funded there. And then a small bit of non-recurring funds to help offset the cost of the campus dietitian. Research and Graduate School, the Deputy Vice Chancellor position is something we've had on the books to attempt to fund for a number of years, and when it will not be permanently funded in this budget cycle either, but there will be non-recurring funding put behind it as well. And then there'll be permanent funding added to the recruitment and marketing coordinator position, which based on the enrollment data coming out of the graduate school has helped significantly. So I think that position has easily paid for itself. Under enrollment management and student success, an additional $604,000 there to support advisement, academic coaching, tutoring, the College Advancement Mentor Program, which is a partnership with the Public Education Foundation, and then the Summer Bridge Program as well. On the institutional side, $4.7 million for a 4% compensation pool. I'll explain that a little more in just a second. Group health insurance adjustments, we're always thankful to receive those because it keeps our health insurance premium for employees down. And then the reallocation of some institutional funds to make up a required debt service obligation related to the Wofford Athletic Center addition at McKenzie Arena. That's a project that came in costing more than we anticipated because of much higher construction costs. As you all know, the construction market is quite robust right now, so we're trying to respond to that. A little bit of money for water quality fee increases, and then phase one of the 2 capital project debt service for the University Center. Scholarships and fee waivers. As many of you all know, we entered this budget cycle anticipating a $4 million budget gap related to scholarships. That was a real gap, largely created by the good work done by each of you all to progress, retain, and graduate students. Our students were retained at a higher rate at the institution. They kept their scholarships longer than we ever anticipated, and they were retained a lot quicker than we ever anticipated. So we created our own gap of $4 million by doing the good work that each of you all have done. Everybody felt that worked on this budget, including the executive leadership team, that this is something that had to be addressed in order for the institution to move forward. We didn't want to have to deal with this every year. So you'll see a good bit of new recurring revenue going into this program, as well as a reallocation of Soaring $4, a little bit of non-recurring dollars in order to fund UT Promise, and then a substantial reallocation from what was previously the grants program of $1.6 million to bring us to a total of $4.1 million. And I can tell you from a financial planning standpoint, it will help our institution significantly by having completed this or by having closed this gap in fiscal year 2022, because it should open us up to do a lot more or have a lot more flexibility in FY23 and beyond. I will say that the question that I'm asked by far the most, and I've pushed off I've pushed off answering this question because I didn't want to answer it prematurely. But what will our compensation look like next year? You all have seen that we'll have a 4% total compensation pool. That was a state proposed increase included in the governor's budget. We are incredibly thankful for the governor proposing that increase, but we want everybody to know, as many of you already do, the state only funds 55% of it because we're a fee producing institution, so we're expected to come up with the other 45%. When we learned it was a 4% pool, that was a shocking thing for all of us because we were never anticipating having to come up with 45% of a 4% pool. We thought we'd have to come up with 45% of a 2% pool. So that's something we had to quickly react to, and is also driving the 2% tuition increase as well. But what will that look like? I'm pleased to report, if approved by the Campus Advisory Board and the UT Board, that our campus minimum wage, inclusive of market merit funds, will be $11.30 an hour for all staff members. This is a 11.9% increase. Currently, it's 10.10. This will impact roughly 40 plus employees at this lowest paid wage level. So we're very happy to be able to propose that. The 4% pool will also include non-tenure track faculty minimums, inclusive of the market merit as well, of $40,000 for individuals that do not have a terminal degree, and $45,000 for individuals that do have a terminal degree. Tenure and non-tenure track promotions and UCF rollovers will continue as usual, and that is fully funded. This also includes adjustments for any staff member that was ranked below quartile 1 of the Job Family Restructure Project. This is a project, a multi-year project that UT undertook, and we supported it, but it did cost us some money in the end with about 70 staff members that were below the Q1 position, but we're pleased that all of those adjustments have been made and will be fully funded. And there'll also be some additional money included for Q1 adjustments for staff members ranked from Q1 and Q2, or those that are facing serious compression. As of July 1, those funds are included as well. And then an allocation that will impact all faculty and staff that are eligible, which will be anyone that's that doesn't have a 9 or below on a staff performance review, or an unsatisfactory review on a faculty EDE, would be eligible for a 2.75% increase in the new fiscal year. So I think overall, it's a very strong financial picture related to salary pool allocation, certainly one of the strongest that I've ever been able to be a part of, and that's largely been because of the very aggressive allocation from the state that we're thankful for. Just real quickly, a few financial health indicators that we're constantly looking at across the institution. The first being our net price. We report a lot of time or we spend a lot of time and energy reporting total cost of attendance, but we often don't tout the net price. And you'll see here for individuals with an expected family income contribution of $0 to $36,000, those students are often getting right at about a $2,000 refund. For individuals with $148,000 expected family income, they're having to pay right at about $3,800. So if you take into account that our average price for an in-state undergraduate student is a little over $9,000, our net price is substantially below, almost $6,000 below what the actual sticker price would be if we were out there advertising this. So this is something that we continue to focus on, and will continue to keep these numbers as low as possible. Our institutional fund balance remains strong at $8.25 million, right at about 4.5% of unallocated expenditures and transfers. I do anticipate we will grow this at the end of this fiscal year. I would really like to get it to $9 million if possible. Auxiliary fund balance, the same strong picture there at about $925,000, or 4.39% of unallocated expenditures, again within the acceptable THEC range. If we could get this to $1 million, that would certainly be welcome at the end of this fiscal year. Notes and bonds payable. This is a picture that will drastically change over the next few years. We're sitting at about $100.7 million right now. We know in FY23 there'll be an additional $25 million added to this for the Wofford Athletics Center debt service. And then in the out years, the two major projects that could impact this number would be a new housing and parking deck project, as well as the University Center renovation, which I mentioned earlier. You'll see here real quickly how much we've invested in faculty and staff compensation over the past 9 fiscal years, $25 million. These are institutional investments only. And I think we've continued to prioritize faculty and staff compensation, and will do so moving forward as well. Square footage on campus has remained right at about 3.6 million square feet. That's a lot of square footage for our facilities folks to keep up with, but they do a very good job with a staffing level, particularly in the grounds department, that they have maintained since about the late 1980s. So they are doing a lot of work with very little resources to keep all of our campus looking the way it does. Housing occupancy rates. This is something we'll continue to monitor very closely as we go into possibly building a new structure. The reason that it's 71 beds higher in 2021 versus 2020 is based on an agreement we entered into with Palmetto Place. That agreement was entered into well in advance of us realizing that our housing capacity would actually be down. So we have house students there, but hindsight, we didn't necessarily need that, but we won't be continuing that agreement going into next fiscal year. I won't go through these at all, but I will point out that we currently have $134 million worth of projects that are either active or in the early planning stages. With the addition of some big projects in the out years, this number will go up substantially. So we are spending a good bit of resources on the project front. And we always like to take the opportunity to thank our very good colleagues and partners at the UC Foundation that they continue to provide tremendous support to our campus with a total endowed value of $176 million as of March 31, which is a very, very strong endowment size for our size campus. We have historically been well in advance of the benchmarks of any other per student expenditures with the UC Foundation. So we're very thankful for them. And to that note as well, they are planned to give our campus in FY 2022 right at about $5.6 million of various endowment payouts throughout the year. So their support truly makes a tremendous difference on the campus. So thank you to our colleagues in that area. And finally, I would be completely remiss not to thank all the individuals that put a tremendous amount of time and effort into this process, including the executive leadership team. Certainly Chancellor Angle is very engaged and it's very helpful throughout the process. The academic deans as well contribute a great deal, as do unit leaders, department heads, and business managers throughout the campus, which we depend on heavily each and every day. I also would not miss the opportunity to thank our colleagues in the Budget and Finance Office, particularly Chris Sherbisman, Allison Evans, Cedric Snowden, Cindy Zing, and Melita Rector, who all do a tremendous job putting all this together. I can certainly take no credit for this presentation and definitely thank them for all they've done. So with that, as I am out of my presenting voice and need a sip of water, I will turn it over to you all for questions.
Do we have any questions?
Hi, Tyler. I just have one question. You mentioned the new minimum salaries for lecturers and the staff minimum wage raise. Will those all take effect on July 1st? So they'll be for the upcoming fiscal year. Is that correct?
Yes, that's a great question, Stephanie. The staff will take place July 1, and then 9-month faculty will take place August 1.
Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Hey, Tyler, quick question, Teresa. Any increase in student assistant funds, or is it just full timers that are getting those, or are there any available for students?
This pool is solely focused on regular employees. It is historically, the central salary pools have not been focused on the student wages, but I can tell you that we're very much so monitoring the federal movement on the hourly wage, and we'll likely have to respond to that. But I also know anecdotally, I don't have the data in front of me, so don't hold me to it, but we don't have a host of students making 7.25 either. We do have federal work studies that are still at 7.25, but a lot of students do tend to make a little above that.
So overall, really strong news. We're in a great financial position going into this next year with strong enrollment, returning to much more of a normal operation. I think we should be in really good shape. So are there any other questions that people would like to ask?
Tyler, this is Gretchen. I had a question about graduate student stipends, but I'm not sure if it's better for you or for Joanne or Ethan to answer it. What determines I think it's 17,000 is what that's set out right now. And I don't know if there's been an increase or a change in that over the years. And is that fall under you, or how is that determined?
I'll answer, and then others can answer as well. The total amount increases when tuition increases, because the fee portion has to increase to account for that. As far as the stipend portion, that has historically been adjusted by the graduate school. I don't know if someone on the call can answer that or not.
I'm just going to jump in here. Yeah, the stipend portion had been increased to include the cost of fees for graduate students. About 2 years ago, I believe, was when we increased that stipend, because we realized that the base stipend was not, the students would also have to pay their fees out of that. So that's how we've the tuition itself goes up with the cost here on campus, and the stipend was increased to include the fees. But that's all we've done basically over the last couple of years.
So no cost of living increases?
No.
Okay.
Any other questions?
If not, let's thank Tyler and all of the budget staff, Chris Sherberson and Allison Evans and their entire team for all their hard work. I know all of the units who have participated in trying to get budget information together. Thank you to everybody. It was a team effort, but great presentation. Any final questions? Okay. All right, well, we'll call it finished. Short time. Okay, thank you all very much. Appreciate you being with us.